Hello, Ohio Sherm. My name is Lou Lessig. I am thrilled to be with you today. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be here. In fact, I'm with you right now, virtually recorded in your virtual vault. So here's what we're going to do. I want to share with you a few things that we're going to do different here than I will live with all of you in Ohio. So here's the story, all right? This is a session that is brand new. It is cutting edge. It is the kind of stuff that you probably won't see anywhere else. So hopefully you've taken the time, you've set aside an hour because you know the value you're going to get right now. So here's what we've got, friends. This session is best engaging. Now, I've done this session multiple times, including at SHRM Annual. So here's what I've done. There are times where we're going to utilize live polling. Now, obviously, this is recorded, so we can't really do live polling in the same way, but I want to give you the most impactful opportunity I can. And so here's what I'm going to do. I've taken all of the slides, all of the responses that I've received at SHRM Annual with a lot of people in the room and all of their responses. So you're going to get to think about what your response might be and then see what everybody else said as well. You see, this is an immersive experience, an opportunity for you to actually truly engage. I have to tell you that this is one of those areas that as a full-time practicing attorney, on top of everything else, as well as being a speaker, this is a topic that I'm incredibly passionate about. And I hope that that comes through to you as we're going through our time today. Now, the other thing you need to realize is that I'm always trying to up my game. I'm always trying to make things better. I'm always trying to make sure that the people that spend time give up their opportunity to do something else and spend it with me, that I deliver value. And so I will ask you as we get close to the end, if you will share some of your initial thoughts, because taking a minute or two of your time is incredibly valuable to you. And it's even more valuable to me as I up my game and constantly try to make things better as I'm delivering it to audiences like yourself around the country. So, in fact, I've got something special for you as an add-on bonus for spending the time with me today, and I will talk to you more about that as we get to it in just a little while. Now, I did mention to you before, this particular session is involved in a lot of stuff, and we'll get to it. But first, I want you to appreciate something. If you haven't figured it out already, I am not your run-of-the-mill employment attorney. Now, yes, that is my day job. And yes, I do try cases and I do fight with agencies and I do take, the position of the employer and try and make sure that everyone understands why we're right. But in addition to doing all that work, I am also trying to make sure that when it comes to my speaking, like we're doing here, we're truly delivering. And so here's what we're going to do. I want you to do me a favor. And I know you're probably either sitting down or on the couch or on the bed or wherever you may be. Do me a favor. Put me down, stand up, and I want you to do me a favor. We're going to breathe together. It's not hokey. Bear with me. Ready? In through the nose, out through the mouth. One more time. And the third time. Did you do it? Now, this is the honor system. I'm going to assume that you did. How do you feel? You see, my friends, this is more than just an opportunity to learn about retaliation and how to take the emotion out of it. It's also an opportunity for self-introspection, for you to consider how things are and how things can be better for you. And keep that in mind as we go through this conversation today and how you feel right now after taking those 3 short breaths. Now, we're going to do some other stuff. We're going to hop right into it. And I'm going to try and gain some other additional information from you because I truly believe in what you have to say as well. I wish we were together live. I certainly appreciate you taking the time to watch me now. So if we were together live, you would see this next slide. And of course, the next slide would be all about sharing with you how we would in fact be doing other things. And so I would tell you, bust out your cell phone, put into the text, here's the numbers, this is the chat, here's what we're going to do. Now, obviously, you can certainly do that. The challenge, of course, is because this is recorded, it's not going to pop up live. What would happen is you would see the stuff live from Poll Everywhere to let you know that you've joined Lou Lessig's session, and then we would hop right into it, my friends. You see, I think that when we talk about retaliation, like so many other important employment laws, there's no question in my mind that retaliation is all based on what people think. It is a collaborative approach and yet an individual focus. I'll explain more about that in a few minutes. But I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. You see, what happens so often is that we all come from different areas and different places, trying to remember a different time or a different opportunity or the way in which we deal with a particular group of folks. What I mean by that is this. We've come together in this conference, or you're watching me now, wherever you may be, but it's different because while we all may work in the same place or in the same field, we don't necessarily look at things the same way. And so I want to share with you the definition from retaliation from my perspective to make sure at least we all start on the same page. Now, when we think about retaliation, I'm not usually big on reading slides to you, and I will try as much as I can not to do that at all. But take a look at this definition, because what becomes so interesting here is that it's so negative. I mean, my Lord, think about it, right? You're doing something and you're being vengeful about it. That does not exude the warm and fuzzy, I'm a dad and here's what we're going to do, or I'm a mom and this is what we're going to do, or out with friends and this is a great thing. This is truly something was done and now I'm reacting. And the difficulty is we don't spend a whole lot of time ever talking about this stuff. Think about it. More than 20 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court, in two cases, Ellerth and Farragher, and yes, I was practicing back then. In fact, it was one of the first published items that I wrote about. And those two cases stood for the proposition that we still deal with today. The idea that we actually need to train folks on anti-discrimination or how not to discriminate, right? We all do it, whether it's a video or whether you got somebody in the room or whether it's just a check the box. We could certainly spend plenty of time talking about that because for the love of God, I can't tell you the number of investigations I've done where organizations have come to me and when I talk to the witnesses, they basically tell me, well, we have the training, but what's the training? The training is turn on the video, walk away, come back an hour later, turn it off, and I've done what I had to do for the year, rather than something that's impactful. Friends, if you get nothing else out of this session, I will tell you right now, this session will be impactful. This is the one that you wanted to take time to spend with right now. That's why we're here today. And I want to thank you for spending the time with me. And I hope that you feel as passionate about it as I do right now as we get through this and as we wrap up. But before we get too far along, I need to ask you a question because I really want to take the time to look at this from the perspective of figuring out the best way to appreciate and understand how this all comes together. In order to do that, we need to find a basis, a foundation to work from. In order to do that, what we're going to do is consider EEOC charges. And I recognize you don't have the utilization of the poll everywhere in the same way, but I asked everyone, and I normally will, and I certainly will when I'm at the conference, and ask about how many claims the EEOC has handled in their most recent reporting year. And when I do that, everyone's going to have an opportunity to respond. This, of course, is the response that I received at SHRM Annual. Now, these numbers, of course, A through D, all relate to the number of charges that the audience believed the EEOC had handled in the most recent reporting year. Now, we want to put this in context, so allow me to help you here. You see, ironically, the correct answer here is in fact D. It's 81,055 charges in the aggregate in their most recent reporting year. Now, here's another fun fact the next time you're out with friends. The prior year, in 2022, B would have been and was the correct answer. An interesting increase. And by the way, I will tell you that B was, wait for it, 20% more than the 2021 filings. Look at the trends. That's part of the reason why what we're talking about today is so ridiculously impactful. Because we're not talking just about, well, what is it? Pregnancy? Is it Title VII? Is it age? What's the basis? What's the concern? Friends, what so many people fail to talk about, what even though we used to talk, and deal with Ellerth and Farragher and why this was such a big deal, let me tell you the one thing that maybe folks haven't shared with you. The number one, let me repeat that, the number one claim and issue that the EEOC deals with, well, to be fair, it's retaliation. These are the most recent statistics. Now, that means that more than half of those 80,000 charges included some component of retaliation. Not only that, but if you think about wherever you may have operations around the country and the employment laws that relate to those locations, I would bet money that all or virtually all, and for those that don't, there's probably a companion law that adds it in, all have some area specifically dedicated to retaliation. That's why these percentages are so high. That's why, by the way, in January, I spent the entire month on trial, not because of race or gender, but because of the allegation of retaliation having nothing to do with either one of those things. This is the big ticket item. This is the item that people don't talk about enough. And yet the EEOC deals with it all the time. And yet it's curious to me that we don't spend more time trying to deal with it. Now, let me try and take this in a slightly different direction. Let's think about something, if we can today. Ponder, if you will, the number of people that live in different states in the Union. And of those folks, consider the number of discrimination cases or claims filed in each one of those jurisdictions. What state do you think has the most discrimination and retaliation filings? Do you have that in your head? You see, that was the next question that I asked everybody live and in person. And in fact, I'm going to show you the results of that right now. What we did here was we created a word cloud. Everyone in the room, you'll notice that not everyone followed the instructions, but c'est la vie. However, as we are moving forward, as we are working on ensuring that truly we're rocking here, it is interesting to me to note one thing. The number one place, population and number of claims filed, actually is not even on the screen. Ponder that for a sec. The number one place, not here. You got to guess in your mind. Hold it. because I'm about to show you the top 10 places around the country. Tennessee is number one, friends. Let's be honest, all politics are local, just like discrimination claims. Now, I know what you're thinking. Lewis, this doesn't make any sense. Forbes must be wrong. How can this be right? Well, remember, it's a function of population versus the number of retaliation and discrimination claims that are filed. Now, perhaps you're looking at this list and you're thinking, there's something wrong. When I think about places around the country that have significant employee-friendly laws, there's only one on this list that makes sense. By the way, that would be Illinois, for those of you that might be wondering. There's no California. There's no New York. There's no New Jersey. California and New Jersey are two of the biggest places, by the way. Heck, there's not even Massachusetts. But these are the top 10. Now, I share this with you because for two reasons. One, because it's not to suggest that there are any less claims where you might have operations, whether we're talking Ohio or anywhere else around the country. This is just one snapshot, one way to cut the statistics. I can tell you from personal experience, there's plenty of lawsuits, plenty of charges being filed. New York, New Jersey, California, Florida, pick your place around the country, Ohio. However, when we take a look at stuff, one thing shines clear, independent of how you look at this stuff, as it relates to retaliation. You see, I begin to wonder as we look at these things and wonder and ponder your operational budgets on an annual basis. How much is slanted towards legal operations? And yet, we're not training on this stuff. Well, listen, I got news for you. If you think you got all this stuff handled, then by all means, turn off the recording. Don't listen to another word. That's perfectly fine. Because guess what? I'm sure that you too have a very small line item within your operating budget right now that you could spend and stroke the check with your CFO right now in order to cover the next retaliation lawsuit that would be coming in the door. Because, of course, you have $155 million hanging around. Now, I know what you're thinking. He's trying to scare me. Actually not. Actually, what I'm trying to do is share with you the reality of what's going on. I'm trying to share with you the kind of numbers that people are hitting on, not for an underlying claim, not for a basic sex, race, religion, national origin type of assertion, or any of the other protected classes that are the bane of our existence. Oh no. This is all about retaliation. Now, I'm going to even make it more real for you, because if you're thinking to yourself, he doesn't really know what he's talking about. I don't really know why I care. Why am I even watching this other than the fact that I need a credit? And by the way, clearly it's to be entertained, but it's also that this is really edutainment, right? Because you're actually going to learn something. What are you going to learn? Well, for starters, all of these organizations in the last 12 months have stroked that kind of a check for people that have brought actions for retaliation, either as a result of a lawsuit or a settlement. Now, I'm sure you're looking at this list and you don't know a single organization on this list. And then you woke up. Is your organization going to be the next one, the next time I provide this particular list to an audience? I hope not. I hope not, because we're spending the time together today, because you recognize, as much as I recognize, the benefit of appreciating what's going on here. The need to truly be able to step back, figure out what's going on, and determine how to do it better. That's what today's about. Think about it. I mean, what happens in this kind of an environment, right? And by the way, these are not small organizations. Thank God, right? You're stroking a 7, 8-figure, 9-figure check. Lord knows you better be a big enough organization to stroke the check. But let's bring it back to reality for a moment, shall we? First of all, these are all actual statistics and they are real cases. And so I'm not doing anything other than sharing with you the reality of where things stand today. Now let's think about what happens. When we normally talk about retaliation, what we begin to say, what we go through is the idea around, as an HR professional, what happens? Allowing individuals to come forward. Now, we got to keep everybody apart, right? Because everybody's getting fired up. We are very polarized in this country right now. Now, if somebody comes forward and they make a good faith claim for some kind of discrimination, pick your poison, the end result is that they are protected from retaliation. You know this. This is not a surprise to you. Let's say they saw something go on that was clearly inappropriate. The fact that they come forward and testify, they're protected from retaliation. It might even be that they choose to exercise their rights under, pick your employment law. We'll go through the alphabet soup, right? Maybe it's the ADA, the FMLA, Title VII. Pick your poison. Doesn't have to be a federal law. We can pick any law you like in the employment space. Even having someone either file litigation or an administrative complaint, like with the EEOC, or the state and local companion entities. The result is, of course, the same because it requires somebody to sit down and realize, hey, they've come forward, we're trying to solve a problem, maybe we're doing an investigation, but we can't retaliate against them for that. Now, that doesn't always sit well with folks. And so let's think about this from the perspective of our employees, of the workforces that we support for a moment. Think about it in a word. How can employees be retaliated against in the workplace? What is it that can happen to them? You have that thought in your head? This is another place where I would have asked for support. I would have asked for an opportunity to share what you thought. And I did the same thing here. And I put it out to the larger group. When I did that, I thought it was kind of interesting. The reason why I thought it was interesting is I got a few comments. I didn't say the room was small that I was in. Now, what do we see here? There's a lot of stuff going on. Now, admittedly, not everybody listened to what I said, right? Because I asked, how can folks be retaliated against? And I got a whole bunch of states in here. Somebody can't spell my name. That was great. A couple of those. But in between the colors of the word cloud, we begin to see how things can work. Having someone feel ostracized or bullied or terminated. Having someone feel harassed or an adverse action as it relates to their salary or their leave. Maybe having them transferred or impacting adversely their performance. Now, these are from your peers, frankly, not even from me. I share them with you so that you begin to see how individuals look at this stuff, how they perceive and internalize how individuals may be retaliated against. And yet, life is way more complicated than that, my friends. Let's look at this in a slightly different way, shall we? Here we go. Have a couple of examples for you to consider. Now, clearly, this is not an all-encompassing list. Why? Well, you might be looking at this on an iPhone or an Android, and the screen's kind of small. right? You might be looking at this on a 55-inch TV. Wow, I might actually be big then. I'm a giant man. That's a whole other story, another joke for another time. Here's what you need to take a look at as you look at this information. Retaliation takes on an incredibly diverse panoply of options that you may not have thought about. And I bet a lot of your managers that are not as passionate about this stuff as we are, well, my friends, they are not going to get it. So let's just dive in right now to it. Listen, the termination thing, that's easy. The demotion thing, we get that. But what about a situation where someone hears what you did or that you came forward and you start to spread false rumors? Or, I'm sorry, someone starts to spread false rumors. That may be enough to be retaliation. In fact, even having someone say, well, Lewis has given me the cold shoulder and has been since I went forward and said that I thought that X, Y, or Z was wrong. And I really feel like I'm getting retaliated against for coming forward. How do you define giving me the cold shoulder? I mean, I don't want to sound silly, but you very quickly begin to see, if we were in a lawsuit, how you're getting over a motion for summary judgment, because figuring out a cold shoulder, that's not so easy. What about the situation where somebody says, hey, Lou, I got to talk to you. I was talking about some of these issues and Gina's calling me names. Now, I know what your first thought is. What are the names? Wrong question to ask, okay? The point is that comments can be made that may seem like they're no big deal, but might just be enough for a retaliation claim. Because what does a plaintiff have to do? They only have to get over summary judgment. That's all they have to do. They just have to convince, if they ever get to the inside of a courtroom, the members of the jury that they were truly retaliated against. Now, at the same time, we could talk about, well, how have working conditions changed? And by the way, there's a bonus session that I'm providing just to Ohio SHRM for your virtual bank, the top 10 employment cases of the year. And in there, I give you some specific examples of cases in this area. So check that out if you need another credit or can't get enough Lou Lessig. But let's say you just tell somebody, well, you know what? You don't have to attend this meeting anymore. That's okay. Or perhaps, and I know what you're thinking, by the way, a poor performance evaluation is sort of ridiculous as it relates to retaliation, because what do people do? They hear that they're going to get a bad performance evaluation, and before you can give them the evaluation, what do? Oh my God, they turn around and guess what? All of the sudden, there's a discrimination claim filed because, well, they're not being nice to me. I know. I get it. I understand what you're saying. I do. But that doesn't mean that it can't be a form of retaliation. And this is just a small example of the possibilities. What is considered retaliation? Well, if you really want to know, guess what? There are plenty of courts all over the country that will tell you, both federal, state, and Commonwealth. There's just literally no limit to the crazy. Now, these are just the things that people think about, right? That occur between individuals as they're doing what they're doing throughout their day. Oh, but my friends, I can make this way more real, way more impactful, way more concerning to you. Come with me. Come with me to a recent opportunity. Let's play the what if game for a moment. Think about, well, have you ever dealt with an employment action in federal court? Maybe some of you have, maybe some of you haven't. It's not necessarily a warm and fuzzy opportunity. or experience. And part of the reason for that is that, to be frank, individuals don't think about it. They are concerned about it because it's not a comfortable place to be. But recently I had an opportunity to go down with a client, and let's presume I was doing this with you. We had a settlement conference. We went down to federal court for that settlement conference. Now, for those of you that haven't done it before, there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. Usually in federal court, whether it's the magistrate or the district judge, everybody's kept separate. Kind of like that earlier slide I showed you. Not everybody's going to get along, so we're going to try and see if we can reach a settlement. So everybody take a breath. Now, we're there waiting. It's the waiting that drives everybody crazy because it's not familiar. Everything is very prim and proper, and you're like, why am I here? And your federal tax dollars are work. Doesn't the chair look nice? Judge comes in, and we talk about all the different things that are involved, right? Remember that these opportunities, when we start talking about settlements, is not just about the number. It's also about the language within the agreement itself. What are you waiving? What are you not waiving? What are you precluded from waiving? What allows you to do what you want to do prospectively, whether we're talking about the plaintiff or whether we're talking about the organization? Doesn't matter. And then we have to consider the other nuance that's oftentimes written into those agreements. Things like a non-solicitation. Things like, are you going to allow someone to be rehired? And so as we're thinking about all those different pieces, judge comes in, sits down. We're sitting next to one another, by the way. I'm a little closer to the judge, protecting you, because you know why I'm there, right? I'm there to make you look good. But it's not just you and I. You've also brought, whether it was your choice or not, your general counsel, and they're on the other side of you, acting very busy, but sitting there just like you and I. And the judge sits down and begins to review what they've just learned over the last 90 minutes sitting there talking to the plaintiff and their attorney about how challenging life is and all the different things that they've had to deal with because of the retaliation suffered upon them by the big bad organization. And the judge is running through different things, trying to find those small wins to get us closer to a settlement. And in the midst of this part of the conversation, the judge turns and says, listen, I'm sure there are certain things we just know you're going to want, right? You're going to want the non-solicitation. You're going to want, the taxes are taken care of by them. We'll get you W-9. You probably don't want them to ever apply again to work for you again. And as the judge finishes the sentence, your general counsel, as you and I are taking down notes, pipes in as if they were parting the Red Sea. Oh, Your Honor, we don't care about the ability to have them apply again. It doesn't matter to us. Now paint the picture. We're in a conference room. It's the judge, myself, you, your general counsel, and nobody else. The room's not that big, although very ornate. The judge looks at me and says, Mr. Lessig, is that truly your position? I said, Your Honor, allow us a few minutes to talk about how we feel about this. Judge said, not a problem. Do me a favor. Just dial 9 when you want me to come back. Judge leaves. The moment the click of the door completes as it closes, it's now my show. And now I'm in a situation where I have to figure out how to engage without losing a client. And I turned to the general counsel. Now we're sitting next to each other, right? So I'm sort of talking around and through you. So my apologies. But I'm asking, do you appreciate the fact that we're here because of a claim of sex discrimination and retaliation? And the response, of course, is, well, of course, I recognize that, Lewis. That's why we're here. That's what you're getting paid for. I get that. Well, then let me ask, why would you want to allow them to come back to work for you? Well, I mean, listen, it lowers the potential hit, meaning that the front pay wages would be smaller because we cut them off because we're basically offering them a job back. I said, all right, well, have you considered the fact that if they come back to work or ever apply to come back to work, and anybody is still working there that had been there before, that they could say something that would then result in the current plaintiff feeling that they were being retaliated against for what they're doing right now, and then filing a new claim? Well, that's not what the law is. And I'm desperately trying not to lose my mind. So to take myself out of the snare for a second, let's be very clear. That is exactly what the law is. That's the whole point of retaliation. But this general counsel, not all of them have a background in employment law, was espousing a position that did not make legal sense. It's part of the reason why I talk to folks about making sure that you're dealing with employment counsel, but more importantly, in the retaliation context, it's a concern around appreciating where the dollars can be spent. If we can settle the case, let's get rid of the whole case. If we allow them to come back, we're only going to create more problems. We've all seen that in the past. And sometimes even my own brethren don't appreciate what that means. I think part of it is because, as I mentioned before, we don't train on this stuff. And there is a fundamental difference in what's going on. What I mean by that is this: when we take a look at where we're focusing on and what we train on, let's think about that for a second. When we look at discrimination training, we're focusing on the individual plaintiff and what happened to them. It's that eggshell plaintiff idea, right? If they are feeling a certain way, they feel that way. Doesn't matter what the alleged harasser said. Doesn't matter what we think as an organization. If they feel that way, that's enough. That's how they get treated. That's the cocoon that they're in. And yet, friends, that's the core claim. That's the sex harassment claim. That's the age discrimination claim. Focusing on how that person feels. But that is not the reality. The reality is when we start looking at retaliation, the focus fundamentally shifts. It's not about the plaintiff. It's about you. What did you say? What did you do? How could you have done X, Y, or Z? It's not looking at their underlying action. It's you heard about it, and now what did you do? Oh my God. It's a completely different focus. And it may seem minor, but in the context of the law, in the context of settlements, there's at least $155 million difference. And so I would impress upon you to think about that when we go through stuff. And so I asked people in prior sessions, and I'll ask you to ponder as well, have you or anybody in your organization ever been accused of retaliation by an employee? Now, when it came time to have this conversation, this is what happened when I recently did this and how people responded. Interesting, the number of people by a pretty big percentage that all felt this way and had dealt with it or are dealing with it now. Well, more than 2/3, more than 80% of the people in the room. Big deal. a big item. And the problem is this: when you start to think about what the retaliation does to you, you have to appreciate the fact that it is, in essence, as if someone took the very foundation underneath your feet right out from under you. You are just barely hanging on. And the reason you're barely hanging on is because this is not something anybody is familiar with. You don't want to have someone question you. You aren't the one that did whatever the harassing is. The challenge is not in that. The challenge is in everything else. And the fact is, no one sat there, no one's talked about it. So what does that mean? It's you're in the unknown. You are stressing about what's happening. You do not know how to address the scenario, how to change what's going on. And friends, this is the entire purpose of having this conversation, because now, today, and in this moment, whatever time of day, however you're seeing me, however you're listening to me right now, this is when you need to stop. We have to agree as professionals. It is time to change how we do things to get better results in this area, to limit the $155 million, to reduce the number of charges, to allow our organizations to be successful. And that's all going to work by having one thing happen. We have to revisit in a much more intentional way, not just what, but why we are providing the responses that we do. It's not about just how things occur. Let's take a look at it this way. Let's assume you, after this video completes and you get your credit, you go back to your desk, you're like, okay, I'm going to see if I figure this out. And you open up today's mail. And when you open up today's mail, there's one particular document that is there just for you. And when you take out that envelope and pull the paper out, what you find is a lawsuit filed by one of the people you know that names your company and, oh yes, you individually. How do you feel? Are you ready to lose your mind? Are you going insane? Are you considering fight or flight? Now, let's be very clear about what happens here. This is not something you get to think about. This is not something that we are being rational about. This is literally in our DNA, friends. This is the kind of thing that happens when something happens from a stress perspective on our body in the moment. In a split second, how things change, how operations occur in ways we cannot remotely ponder. And so I will ask you to think about, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I use a phrase like fight or flight? Again, another question that I pose to everybody in the room. Here's how they responded in Chicago. A lot of different thoughts. But as you take a look around, obviously the biggest thing that folks felt was anxiety and fear. Makes total sense. That's the whole point of fight or flight. But then you also consider things like emotionally how people feel. I thought body slam was kind of interesting. You have references to the parts of the body that deal with fight or flight. You have, and I think very poignantly, an individual who mentions the very primal nature of this response. Friends, this is the response we don't talk about. This is what we're not training on. And this is why plaintiffs are hitting at such a high dollar number. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, what do we do? How do we address it? I think before we can get there, we have to be honest about what's going on. And so we have to consider what's going on in that fight or flight moment, in that moment when you see that complaint with your name on it, what happens? The truth is, the response that you have is, again, in our DNA. It is physiological in nature. It is your adrenaline pumping, right? You see that, oh my God, I cannot believe it. It's like feeling an earthquake, right? Now, the way the body works, I know I'm not a doctor, I just play one on TV, but the way the body works, okay, you get amped up, that's the adrenaline pumping, right? You're ready to go. You get calmed down with that information by having the noradrenaline pump in to calm down the adrenaline. But the reality is, this is all about trying to figure out the stress that's going on in your life. Understanding the ridiculous number of things that are happening to you in the moment. Now, there are physical responses to this too, because you may have felt in the moment any number of these things happening. A racing heartbeat, shallow breaths, looking a little peaked, feeling like you're, going to lose your mind a little bit. Maybe even for some of you, panic attacks. Now, let's boil this down. If you opened up this complaint, you saw the complaint, your name in it, your company's name in it, and your adrenaline starts pumping, your heartbeat is racing, your breath is, oh my God, what did I do wrong? I don't know what to do. Here's what you need to appreciate. Stop. It's going to take 20 minutes to an hour for that adrenaline to calm down with enough noradrenaline for your body to return to its calmer state. I mean, think about it. Think about how we first started our time together today, where I asked you to take your breaths. Were you more relaxed before or after you took the breaths? Let's look at it another way. Let's say you're on a plane. Let's say you're on a plane to go somewhere warm for a vacation. You're flying at 38,000 feet. And in 3 seconds, you went from 38,000 feet to 28,000 feet. How do you feel? Maybe you're not one to fly. Let's put you in a car. Let's say you're driving down the street. Someone comes out of nowhere and broadsides your vehicle. And in that moment, what is your reaction? These are the ways that we know this stuff is real. This fight or flight is not a joke. The problem is when you read that complaint, and how do people deal with it, right? What do they do? There's no recognition of how we have to handle this stuff. This is why I'm running around the country talking about all this stuff, because guess what? People have to appreciate what's happening to their body. Not only that, what do? Maybe it's, listen, stop, don't do anything, take a deep breath. Or perhaps you're the kind of person where I need to get up, I got to walk around, I need to change the scenery, I got to do something else. Maybe it's maybe you need a moment with your mind to just center yourself. This is the physical response, the physical reality. And yet, these are just two of the main ways that things may happen, because guess what? We also can't forget about those individuals who otherwise might just freeze right in place. And I know what you're thinking. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you get angry? Well, again, this is an appropriate response for some, but it leads or is revealed in the inability to move. Ironically, absent the normal fight or flight response, or one of the fight or flight responses, it actually has a reduced heartbeat and gives a different type of muscle tension. What becomes important is to appreciate that in addition to fight or flight, we also have these situations where individuals may actually freeze, feel as if they can't get stuff done. And the idea, of course, is the DNA level of this stuff. You're preparing for your next step. But again, you're not inherently reacting in the moment. That's the problem. That's what people are doing. That's where the issue comes in. I had the opportunity at one point to be in my office. Shocking. And I'm doing work at my desk. As I'm doing work at my desk, my phone rings. When the phone rings, I pick it up. And it was one of those opportunities where when you hold the receiver near to your ear and whether the phone is here or all the way out here, it's as if it's right here because the person talking is so loud? Oh my God, Lewis, I had to call you. You don't understand what's going on here. I mean, I just opened my mail. I got this lawsuit. I'm named. I can't believe this. They don't know who they're dealing with. I mean, my God, I've been running this organization for 20 years. I've been in this role. This is not going to be the way I'm going out. I can't believe they did this. And I'm feverishly taking notes. They don't know who they're dealing with. This is insane. I didn't do anything wrong. They must be crazy. Do they know what they're dealing with here? I mean, I can't believe that anybody that works for me would have the audacity to name me. Do they understand what's going on? 10 minutes of this, like this, all the way out here. I'm not even getting a word in edgeways. I'm barely able to keep up. And in the moment, I'm trying to find the place to as I'm writing down, I'm listening to the phone, I'm going back and forth. I'm so angry. I just don't know what to do. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. As they're telling me about how awful this person is and what they're going to do and how angry they are and how it's a personal affront on all the things that they have done to get to where they are today, to run this building, to have 200 people work for them. Do they know what's going on? And finally, I couldn't take it anymore. And I just said, Mom, stop. I hear what you're saying. I appreciate that you don't like the fact that your employer got named in a lawsuit, and right under it, because you run the building, you got named too. Well, Lewis, you don't understand. Mom, stop. You're in my world now. You are not in your world. You need to listen to your son for a change and appreciate what I'm telling you and why. I need you to answer some questions for me. I need you to take a breath. Well, you don't understand. Mom, I know you are a very accomplished individual. That is not what this is about. This is not time to clear your name. This is not time for you to fight back. This is time for you to listen. You are not listening. Well, of course I'm not listening. Mom, stop. Are you chairing within the organization other meetings where this individual is on the committee or in the room? No. Good, don't change it. When it comes to doing evaluations, are they an individual for whom you are charged to evaluate? No, but I'm going to stop. Don't change it. Are there any other meetings or activities where you are there as the supervisor and they are reporting directly to you more so than any other time? No. Good, don't change it. But they don't understand who they're dealing with, and I can't really have this way, and they don't. Mom, stop. Here's what's going to happen. Number one, you are not defending yourself. Number two, I know the attorney that represents the organization. I'm going to call him. He's going to take care of you. You are not doing another damn thing. Now, if you do, you will create another retaliation count in this lawsuit. I want you out of the lawsuit. You don't want to be in the lawsuit. Listen to your son. She took a breath. Miraculously, for change, my mother listened to me. She did get out of that lawsuit, although her employer did not for some time. She got out because she listened, because she stopped, because she was not trying to defend herself in the moment. What she lacked to understand in the time that we first got together is that the goal here is not for her to clear her name. It's to figure out from an organizational perspective, what is a win-win and how do we get there? And the truth is, it is not about you and clearing your name in that moment. What it's about is ensuring that you are not, let me say that again, that you are not in any way, shape, or form doing anything that will create any level from your perspective of payback. And the reason for that is that is the core of the problem. Now, there's a lot more to this stuff, but I'm very interested in what all of you said. And what I asked you in the very beginning was I'm going to show you something. I'm going to ask you to try and take a look at it and share with me what you can so I can continue to up my game. And so for that, I'm going to give you a minute and ask you to take a look at this and provide me your feedback whenever it is that you may be watching this right now. And so I'm going to put this up here. One of two options, right? You can either pull up the QR code and it'll take you right to the page, or you can, on your computer, put in the line there and pop in the code, and it will similarly take you to the same thing. Okay, won't take you but a minute, maybe a minute and a half. Provide your thoughts. I really, truly appreciate it. The code, if you need to put it in, is WAKE. And understand, by the way, when you get through all this, I have a questionnaire to help you in those moments and your organization when something happens. And I have a closing thought for you, or a few, really, that I'll provide to you in a minute. Just give you some time to run through this for me. I will thank you in advance, and I'll close in a moment. Should have gotten some good music for you while you're doing this. And I do greatly appreciate you taking the time to fill this out. You may not be done yet, but in the interest of making sure that I cover these last important thoughts for you, I'm going to get moving to stop and complete this on time. But I would encourage you to please continue to finish filling this out. And if you need to pause this, I totally understand. What we need to appreciate in all this related to retaliation is the fact that too many people react. They don't take the time to reset themselves. That's the material that you'll be provided when you complete this evaluation. And it's also leads into my final thoughts here, because you have to think about, what do you do next? When that claim comes in, when someone makes that accusation, when that complaint lands on your desk, you know, the first thing you need to do really is consider, how did you treat that person before any of this ever happened? Because that's going to be the basis or the foundation from where they start. And so if you were not nice to them before, I'm not telling you to kiss up to them now. You just don't want to change how you were. At the same time, it's going to be important for you to take a moment for yourself. You may live in a very frenetic pace. It may be that everything has to be done yesterday or last week. But in the moment where something like this comes up, you can't do that. You need to take the time to truly center yourself, to not react, to not answer the phone. Take a moment. Take 30. Okay? That's much, much more important than you realize. Remember, all that adrenaline, right? It's taken at least 20 minutes for it to calm down. And that's only after that noradrenaline starts pumping. And it's a physiological thing. There's nothing you can do about it. Don't fight it, because you can't. It's how we are as humans. Additionally, you want to be able to jot down for yourself, why are you feeling the way that you feel? Is it about you? Is it about them? Is something else going on? Because understanding your perspective is going to make a big difference. At the same time, you're going to want to try to think through, what can you do next? What are the different options? Because it's just like playing chess now, right? That fight or flight's going to be dying down, and then you've got to look through and figure out your best next move. Similarly, you are not alone. There are other people around, be it in HR, be it in legal, be it in other areas, that can help you think through and strategize through this. And it's important to enlist them before you do anything, because just like Bear Bryant said, you want to be able to cause something to happen, but you want to be able to cause something to happen in a positive way for you and the organization, to reduce that potential retaliation claim and ensure that you are fully centered. I hope that this talk has been particularly enlightening for you and helpful. It's something that, as you can tell, I'm a little bit passionate about. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope that we stay in touch. And I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to share an hour with me so we could talk about the emotional issues in and around retaliation and how to reduce them to protect you and your organization. Thank you so much, and have a fantastic rest of your day. I hope to see you again soon. Bye now.